They called me dead weight. Imagine that. After 40 years of keeping this family stitched together, cooking, cleaning, paying bills on time when my late husband was too drunk to remember, they shoved me out the door with nothing but a suitcase and a plastic bag of essentials. "Mom," my daughter hissed, eyes darting to her husband like he was the puppet master and she the puppet. "We can't carry you anymore. Kevin says we need space. You're just dead weight." Dead weight. Honey, I nearly laughed when she said it. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. Me, the woman who raised her, taught her to braid her hair, stayed up all night sewing her prom dress when she changed her mind the day before. I was the dead weight. So I dragged my battered suitcase down the driveway like a soldier leaving a battlefield. The house behind me, the one Robert and I mortgaged with blood and sweat, glowed like a stranger's palace. They stood in the doorway, smug as royalty, while I shuffled off into the night like a beggar. If you're watching this, honey, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because you're about to see how the so-called dead weight became the one holding every single card. Pawn? No. I became the queen. The motel room smelled like stale cigarettes and bleach that didn't quite cover the mold. The bedspread had flowers so faded they looked like ghosts. I sat on the edge, clutching the $200 cash they'd tossed at me like hush money. "Don't say we don't help," Kevin had sneered, pressing the bills into my hand like he was tipping a waitress. $200. That was my worth to them. I'll admit, for a moment, I broke. Tears burned my eyes, rolled down the creases of my face. At 68, I had thought my golden years would be filled with gardening, tea on the porch, maybe grandchildren visiting on weekends. Instead, I was staring at a flickering motel lamp, my stomach knotted with shame. But shame has a way of turning into steel when you sit with it long enough. As I lay on that lumpy mattress, I remembered Robert's words the night before his last surgery. "Maggie, don't ever let anyone push you off your throne. This house, this life, we built it. Don't let them steal it from you." At the time, I thought he meant sentiment. Now, I realized he meant strategy. Because, honey, this story has more twists than a pretzel factory on double shift. And they had just made the first move. The next morning, I walked to the bus stop. My shoes pinched, my coat smelled like mildew, but my back was straight. I wasn't going to crumple into the stereotype of the abandoned old woman. At 9:45 a.m., I was sitting in attorney Daniel Harrison's office, Robert's lawyer. The one man Kevin had never liked, which now struck me as suspicious. Mr. Harrison looked over his glasses as I recounted every detail: the eviction, the insult, the cash. His face didn't change much, but his pen tapped faster and faster on the desk. Then he leaned back, eyes glinting. "Mrs. Whitmore, I think you'll find your late husband anticipated this very scenario." He opened a file drawer, pulled out a folder labeled "Will Confidential," and slid it across the table. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was Robert's real will. Not the copy Kevin had waved around after the funeral, the one that suspiciously left everything to my daughter with vague promises of joint ownership. This one had clear conditions. Every asset, house, savings, even Robert's pension was to remain under my care until my death. My daughter would only inherit if she continued to provide for me as long as I lived. If she failed, everything reverted back to me or, upon my passing, to charity. The irony was so perfect it was almost poetic. They thought they had outplayed me. In reality, they had checkmated themselves. I closed the folder, my lips curving. Pawn to queen. That night, back in the motel, I stared at the peeling wallpaper with new fire in my chest. Tomorrow, Harrison would begin the process of freezing the accounts, halting every transfer Kevin had tried to sneak through. But tonight, I rehearsed the words I'd deliver to my daughter the moment she realized the game had shifted. "You called me dead weight. Well, honey, dead weight doesn't sink. It drags others down until they drown. So here's my promise, for everyone listening. They pushed me out, humiliated me, called me useless. But in 2 weeks, they would be knocking on my door, desperate, broke, and begging me for help. And when that day came, I'd be ready. This wasn't just survival. This was war. Family? No. That's DNA. Watch me. It didn't happen all at once. That's the cruel trick of betrayal. It slides in quietly, like a draft through a cracked window, until suddenly the whole house is cold. After Robert's funeral, Victoria played the grieving daughter with an Oscar-worthy performance. She held my hand, dabbed my tears with tissues that smelled faintly of her Chanel No. 5, whispered promises that she'd take care of me, Mom. Don't you worry. But the second the casseroles from the neighbors stopped arriving and the sympathy cards stopped coming, the mask began to slip. At first, it was little things. She'd roll her eyes when I asked for help changing a light bulb. She started locking the liquor cabinet like I was a thief. And Kevin had never liked me. But now, with Robert gone, he didn't bother to hide it. One morning, 3 weeks after the funeral, I walked into the kitchen to find Kevin sitting at the table in his tailored suit, sipping espresso from the mug Robert had always used. My mug. He didn't even glance up as he said, "We've been talking. The house, it's a lot of space for just us and the kids. We think it makes sense if you find somewhere else to stay." I froze. Somewhere else? Victoria bustled in, pretending to be cheerful. "Just temporary, Mom. Kevin thinks maybe a retirement community. You'd meet people your own age." Retirement community. As if I hadn't just buried my husband. As if I hadn't poured my savings into making sure she could afford her law degree. I sat down across from them, the sunlight hitting the silver in my hair like a crown. "This is my house. Robert and I bought it. Every brick, every tile. You grew up here. You don't get to erase me." Kevin smirked. That smug, Wall Street smirk. "Actually, Margaret, the deed lists Robert as primary, and since he's gone, Victoria is the heir. You're just the wife." Just the wife. The words hit harder than any slap. That evening, I overheard them arguing in the living room. "She'll never leave quietly," Victoria hissed. Kevin's voice was sharp. "Then make her. She's dead weight. She's draining us. I didn't marry you to babysit your mother." Dead weight. There it was, the poison phrase I'd hear again soon, delivered to my face. I clutched the banister upstairs, heart pounding, as I realized my daughter wasn't my daughter anymore. She was his echo, his puppet. And together, they were vultures circling the house Robert and I built. The next day, they staged their little intervention. Victoria put on her sad eyes mask. Kevin played the reasonable son-in-law. "Mom, we've looked at options," she said, sliding a glossy brochure across the table. "Sunny Acres, isn't it lovely? They have bingo nights." I stared at the page. A row of smiling old people in matching cardigans. A pool no one swam in. A fake paradise for forgotten parents. "Bingo nights," I repeated. My voice was flat, but inside something sharp was stirring. Kevin leaned back in his chair. "It's what's best. You'll have friends. We'll have space. Everyone wins. Everyone wins except me." I pushed the brochure back. "Not happening." Victoria's mask cracked. "Why are you being so difficult? You don't drive. You don't cook. You barely exist?" I finished for her. Her silence was louder than any answer. That night, I packed a suitcase. Not because I wanted to leave, but because I knew if I didn't, they'd make a scene. And honey, if there's one thing I refuse to give them, it's the satisfaction of watching me beg. Victoria hovered at the door, wringing her hands. Kevin stood behind her, arms crossed, victorious already. "Mom," she said softly, "don't make this harder than it has to be. You'll thank us one day." Thank them? For stripping me of my home? For calling me a burden? I lifted the suitcase handle, looked her square in the eyes, and said, "Dead weight doesn't thank anyone. Dead weight sinks ships." And with that, I walked into the night. In the days that followed, I replayed those moments over and over. The Chanel No. 5 lies, the espresso mug theft, the phrase, "just the wife." It wasn't grief making her cruel. It wasn't stress. It was choice. She chose him. She chose greed. She chose to turn her back on blood. But here's the irony, honey. Sometimes the choice you make today writes the downfall you'll read tomorrow. And as I sat on that motel bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper, I made my own choice. I wouldn't be their dead weight. I would be their anchor. And when the tide turned, it would drag them straight down. Watch me. You don't know the meaning of humiliation until you're 68 years old, standing in the rain with a suitcase that's older than your daughter, while the lights in your own living room glow behind you lights you're no longer allowed to switch off. Kevin didn't even let me leave with dignity. He carried my suitcase down the steps like he was doing me a favor, dropped it on the curb, and dusted his hands. "Affordable," he said. That one word, tossed like trash, rang in my ears the whole night. Victoria handed me an envelope with $200 inside, like she was tipping me for decades of service. "It's just until you're settled, Mom. Don't be dramatic." Dramatic? Honey, if they think I was dramatic that night, they had no idea what was coming. The motel was 6 blocks away from the bus line, 2 from a gas station that doubled as a liquor store and a pawn shop. When I checked in, the clerk didn't even look up from his phone. "Cash only," he muttered, sliding a key across the counter. A real metal key, not a card. Room 8. The door creaked when I pushed it open. The carpet was stiff with stains, the kind that told stories you'd rather not hear. The curtains were thin enough that the neon sign outside bled through, flashing vacancy in pulsing red letters onto the bedspread. The bedspread itself had roses once, but now they were gray, wilted ghosts of flowers, long dead. I set my suitcase down and sat on the edge of the mattress. It sagged, like it was sighing under my weight. I pulled out the envelope, counted the bills again. 200, 10 20s. Kevin's smirk burned in my mind. Affordable. That night, I wrapped myself in my coat instead of using the scratchy motel blanket. I stared at the water stain on the ceiling, shaped like a map of a country no one wanted to visit, and I cried. Not the polite tears you hide behind tissues at funerals. No, these were raw, ugly sobs that shook my whole body, because for the first time in my life, I felt disposable. Dead weight. The next morning, I walked down to the gas station and bought coffee. Not the Starbucks latte Victoria ordered daily, just burnt black sludge in a styrofoam cup. I paid with crumpled bills from my envelope, the cashier barely glancing at me. I sat outside on the curb, sipping bitterness, watching the traffic hum by, mothers driving kids to school, men in ties heading to offices, couples laughing at nothing. Life moved on, and here I was, invisible. But invisibility has its perks. No one notices when you're planning revenge. Because as I sat there, I remembered something Robert once told me, years ago when we fought about money. "Maggie, you can trust the law more than family. Paper beats blood." At the time, I thought it was cynical. Now, it was prophecy. That afternoon, I called the only person I could trust, Mr. Daniel Harrison, Robert's attorney. His secretary's voice was clipped, efficient. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. "But tell him it's Margaret Whitmore, and it's urgent." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Come in tomorrow, 9:45 sharp." I hung up, my heart pounding. Back at the motel, I paced the room, rehearsing what I'd say. How much detail should I give? Would he even believe me? Kevin was slick. Victoria was his echo. They probably thought they'd covered every base. But if Robert's instincts were right, if Harrison had kept a real copy of the will, then maybe, just maybe, I wasn't powerless. That night, I dreamed of chess. Robert loved the game. He used to tell me, "Pawns are underestimated, Maggie, but if they survive, if they keep moving, they can become queens." In the dream, I was the pawn. Kevin was the smug knight, leaping over rules. Victoria was the bishop, moving diagonally, always indirect. Robert was gone, the king tipped over. But me, I kept moving, square by square, until I reached the other side. When I woke up, the motel room still stank of bleach. The neon still flashed, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't dead weight. I wasn't disposable. I was still moving. The next morning, I packed my coat, brushed my hair, and left the motel early. As I walked to the bus stop, I passed a mother yelling at her son to hurry up. He stomped his foot and shouted, "You're not the boss of me." I smiled, bitter and sweet at once. "Oh, honey," I thought, "you have no idea." Because tomorrow, when I sat in Harrison's office, I would prove to Kevin and Victoria exactly who the boss was. And it wasn't the smug husband in the tailored suit. It wasn't the daughter who called me dead weight. It was me. You know that feeling when you're walking into a storm, but part of you is hoping it'll wash you clean? That's how I felt stepping into Harrison & Co. Law the next morning. The lobby smelled of lemon polish and old money. A receptionist with perfect hair looked up and gave me the kind of smile people reserve for senior citizens who might get lost. "Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Harrison will see you now." I followed her down a hall lined with mahogany panels and framed degrees. My shoes squeaked on the polished floor. For a moment, I felt like a schoolgirl summoned to the principal's office. Except this time, I wasn't the one in trouble. Daniel Harrison looked exactly the same as the last time I'd seen him, at Robert's retirement dinner. Silver hair, glasses perched low on his nose, suit pressed sharp enough to cut paper. He stood when I entered, genuine warmth in his eyes. "Margaret," he said, "I was wondering when you'd come. Sit, sit." The kindness almost undid me. I gripped the chair arms, steadying myself. "Daniel, I need to ask you something. About Robert's will." His brows furrowed. "Didn't Victoria give you your copy after the reading?" My stomach dropped. "Reading? What reading?" "She told me you were too distraught, that she'd handle everything. I delivered the original and several copies to her 6 weeks ago." 6 weeks, right after the funeral. I felt the blood drain from my face. My daughter had staged an entire performance. She hadn't just lied, she'd erased me from the story. Daniel opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. He slid it across the desk. "Margaret, Robert was very specific. He revised his will 6 months before he passed. He was worried about Victoria." My hands shook as I opened the file. The first page bore Robert's neat handwriting, his signature crisp at the bottom, witnessed, notarized, ironclad. Daniel adjusted his glasses and began to read aloud, his voice slow and deliberate. "I, Robert Thomas Whitmore, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved wife, Margaret Eleanor Whitmore, the following. Our primary residence at 411 Cedar Lane, including all furnishings and personal effects. Additionally, 70% of all financial assets, investments, and accounts, totaling approximately $19 million. Nineten million." The numbers swam before my eyes. Daniel continued, his voice sharpening. "To my daughter, Victoria Whitmore Daniels, I leave $10 million to be held in trust. Distribution shall begin on her 45th birthday, contingent upon her respectful and compassionate treatment of her mother following my death." I sat frozen, staring at the words. Respectful and compassionate treatment. Robert had known. He'd anticipated this exact betrayal. "Daniel," I whispered, "Victoria told me I inherited nothing. She moved into my house. She gave me $200 and told me to find somewhere affordable." His face flushed with anger. "That's fraud, Margaret. Elder abuse. She's committed multiple felonies." I let out a bitter laugh. "She called me dead weight, and now she's the one sinking." Daniel leaned forward, his eyes sharp behind the glasses. "Margaret, listen carefully. Your husband protected you. This trust clause means Victoria's inheritance is void. Everything house, assets, all $30 million is yours." The irony hit me like thunder. My daughter's cruelty had cost her everything. She thought she was cutting me off, but she'd just written herself out of the will. I pressed my hands flat on the table, grounding myself. "So, what happens now?" "Now, my dear," Daniel said, a wry smile tugging at his lips, "we call the bank, we freeze the accounts, we call the police, and then we let Victoria discover that the pawn has become the queen." For the first time since Robert's funeral, I felt a spark inside me. Not grief, not despair, something sharper. Rage, yes, but also resolve. Because, honey, my daughter thought she'd buried me in a budget motel. What she didn't realize was that I'd just unearthed a war chest. By the time I left Harrison's office, the folder clutched under my arm. The air outside felt different. The sky was gray, the wind sharp. But I wasn't the same invisible widow who'd checked into a cheap motel 2 nights ago. I was a woman with proof, with power, with a paper trail that trumped blood. And Victoria? She was about to learn that sometimes the house doesn't win. Sometimes the house belongs to me. You know that sound when a door locks? That solid click that says, "You're not getting in"? That's what it felt like when Daniel picked up the phone in his office and started dialing. One call at a time, he was locking Victoria out of the empire she thought she'd stolen. "First, the banks," he said, his voice brisk, professional. He spoke into the receiver with a kind of cold authority I'd never heard from him before. "Yes, this is Attorney Daniel Harrison. I'm calling to initiate a freeze on all accounts belonging to the estate of Robert Whitmore. There's been fraudulent misrepresentation." Fraudulent misrepresentation. That's lawyer speak for my daughter forged papers and kicked me out of my own home. Within 20 minutes, every account tied to Robert's estate had been flagged. The balance $30 million was suddenly frozen in ice thicker than the Arctic. "Now the utilities," Daniel said. Another call. Yes, power, gas, water, suspend all transfers pending verification of ownership. I almost laughed, picturing Victoria flipping a light switch and nothing happening. No lights, no heat, no hot water for Kevin's precious morning shave. By the time Daniel hung up, the storm had started to gather. At exactly 2:17 p.m., my phone rang. Victoria's name flashed across the screen like a warning flare. I answered, my voice steady. Hello? Her voice came out sharp, frantic. Mom, something's wrong. The bank says Daddy's accounts are frozen. The utility company says the transfers are invalid. What did you do? I looked at Daniel, who gave me a tiny nod. This was the moment. Hello, Victoria, I said, calm as a still pond. I'm sitting in Daniel Harrison's office, your father's attorney. You remember him? The one who read the real will, to an empty room. Because you told him, I was too distraught. Silence. Then a shaky inhale. Mom, I don't know what you think you've discovered. Oh, I discovered plenty. I cut her off. I discovered that your father left me 70% of everything. The house, the assets, the accounts. And do you want to know what he left you? Her voice trembled. What? 10 million. Contingent on treating me with dignity and respect. I let the words hang like smoke. And, sweetheart, throwing your 68-year-old mother out on the street with $200 and calling her dead weight? That doesn't exactly qualify as respect. Her composure cracked like glass. That's impossible. Dad wouldn't. Oh, he would. He did. He even wrote it down in black and white. Your inheritance is gone. Every last dollar reverts to me. She tried a different tactic, her voice dripping fake sweetness. Mom, you're confused. You're grieving. Someone's taking advantage of you. I almost laughed. The audacity. Even caught red-handed, she thought she could manipulate me like always. No, Victoria, I said. I'm not confused. I'm angry. And I'm done playing your games. Her voice rose, desperate. You wouldn't dare press charges against your own daughter. Something cold and sharp crystallized inside me. I spoke slowly, clearly. Watch me. When I hung up, Daniel was beaming. That, he said, was magnificent. But he wasn't done. By 4 p.m., he had the police involved. A detective named Rodriguez called in, her tone clipped and professional. Mrs. Whitmore, I've reviewed the forged will your daughter presented. These documents are sophisticated, likely not her handiwork alone. We'll need to investigate Kevin's involvement as well. So Kevin, the smug son-in-law, might be deeper in the mud than Victoria. The thought warmed me like a cup of strong coffee. Detective Rodriguez continued. We'll obtain warrants tonight. Accounts are already frozen. Their credit cards will start declining within hours. Expect a phone call. And oh, honey, she was right. At 6:42 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Kevin. His voice was oily, rehearsed. Margaret, surely we can resolve this privately. No need to escalate things. Victoria made some poor decisions. But family shouldn't be dragged into court. Family. I almost choked. You mean the family that threw me out of my house and called me dead weight? I asked. That family? He coughed, sidestepped. Look, Margaret, money complicates things. You've never had to manage large sums. Victoria and I were just trying to protect you. Protect me from my own inheritance. By forging legal documents and dumping me in a motel with $200. Kevin, I said coldly, you can explain your version of protection to Detective Rodriguez. She'll be calling soon. By nightfall, the picture was clear. The accounts were frozen, utilities suspended, police circling. Victoria thought she had me cornered. She thought she'd reduced me to nothing but dead weight. But in less than 24 hours, the tables had turned. I wasn't dead weight anymore. I was holding all the cards. You can measure a person's arrogance by the restaurant they choose for their downfall. Victoria and Kevin picked Le Bernard, the kind of place where the cheapest appetizer costs more than a week at the Sunset Inn. Linen napkins, chandeliers, waiters who look like they're auditioning for a tuxedo catalog. Perfect backdrop for what happened next. Detective Rodriguez had promised me, we'll do this clean, public, no shadows. At exactly 8:30 p.m., as Victoria raised a glass of overpriced champagne to toast her new life, 2 officers walked in, crisp uniforms catching the light. They didn't glance at the maitre d'. They went straight to her table. Victoria Daniels, you are under arrest for fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. The restaurant went silent. Forks hovered midair. A woman in pearls gasped. Kevin jumped to his feet, shouting about false arrest and mistakes, but the officer had already clicked cold steel around Victoria's wrists. The irony was almost poetic. Victoria, who'd sneered at me for being dead weight, being led out in handcuffs, tripping on her designer heels. I wasn't there in person, I didn't need to be. Detective Rodriguez texted me a photo. Victoria's face twisted, mascara streaking, while a crowd of strangers recorded on their phones. The next morning, Kevin wasn't so lucky either. He strutted into his office at 9 a.m., no doubt planning damage control, only to find federal agents waiting by his mahogany desk. The charge? Conspiracy to forge legal documents. The evidence? A printing company he'd used for shady prospectuses now traced back to Victoria's fake will. By lunchtime, both my daughter and son-in-law were in custody. Word travels fast in a city like ours. By evening, every local news channel was running the same headline. Prominent couple arrested in $30 million inheritance fraud. And my phone? Exploding. Friends, neighbors, even strangers from church calling, whispering shock. Margaret, is it true? Margaret, I always suspected Kevin. Margaret, are you all right? I was better than all right. For the first time in weeks, I slept in my own bed. The mattress firm, the sheets crisp, the silence of my house wrapping around me like armor. But if I thought peace would come quickly, I underestimated just how desperate the Daniels-Hayes clan could be. 3 days later, there was a knock at my door. Not Victoria, she was still stewing in county lockup. Not Kevin, he was denied bail after the judge learned about his financial crimes. No, this time it was Eleanor Hayes, Kevin's mother. If entitlement had a perfume, she wore it. Diamonds on her wrists, hair sprayed into place so stiff you could break it with a hammer. She swept into my living room like a queen visiting a peasant. Margaret, she said, settling into my sofa without asking, we need to discuss this situation rationally. Rationally, that was her word. Your daughter made mistakes, Eleanor continued, crossing her legs with practiced grace. Kevin may have followed her lead, but dragging this through court? Vindictive, don't you think? Vindictive. As if being thrown into a budget motel with $200 wasn't reason enough for vengeance. What exactly are you proposing? I asked, my voice flat. She smiled, a shark smile. A settlement. Kevin's family is prepared to compensate you. $2 million in exchange for dropping the charges. $2 million. Like I was supposed to be dazzled, when the inheritance they tried to steal was 30. I leaned back, studying her. $2 million to forgive the man who helped my daughter forge documents, steal my house, and throw me out like trash? That seems affordable. Her smile faltered. $5 million, she snapped. Final offer. For a moment, I almost laughed. They really thought money was the problem. They thought I'd take a payout, tuck my dignity into a bank account, and let them waltz free. Mrs. Hayes, I said. Kevin committed felonies. He's going to prison. Victoria too. And no number of zeros will buy their way out. Her mask cracked, just a little. You should know, Margaret, Kevin's legal team has uncovered some irregularities in Robert's business dealings, information that could tarnish his reputation. If this goes to trial, that may all come out. There it was, the real game, blackmail. I stood slowly, letting her feel the shift in the room. Let me make this clear. Your son and my daughter stole from me. They humiliated me. They called me dead weight, and now they'll face justice. If you think threatening Robert's memory will change that, you've underestimated me as badly as they did. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. She rose, smoothing her designer skirt. Very well. Don't say I didn't warn you. She swept out the door, leaving a trail of perfume and venom behind her. That night, I sat in Robert's study, my study now surrounded by his neatly labeled files. Eleanor's words echoed in my head. Irregularities. Tarnish his reputation. Was she bluffing? Or had Robert kept secrets from me? I ran my fingers over the folders, each labeled with years, contracts, partners. For decades, I'd cooked his dinners, raised his daughter, polished his trophies, but I'd never opened these drawers. Until now. Because, honey, if Eleanor thought she could scare me into silence, she didn't know me at all. She thought I'd accept hush money. She thought I'd walk away from justice. But what she didn't know was this. The pawn had already become the queen. And queens don't fold under pressure. They press harder. They say every marriage has 3 lives: the life you live together, the life you show the world, and the life that stays locked in drawers you never open. For 40 years I thought Robert and I had no locked drawers. Turns out, I was wrong. The morning after Eleanor's visit, I returned to Robert's study. The oak desk still smelled faintly of his pipe tobacco, though he hadn't smoked in years. His chair creaked the way it always had, like it was sighing under the weight of old secrets. I pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside, files, contracts, ledgers, all in Robert's meticulous handwriting. My husband, the man I'd trusted with every breath of my life, had been keeping records I'd never seen. One folder was marked with a single word: confidential. I opened it, and the air seemed to shift. Inside were receipts from overseas transfers dating back nearly 15 years. Shell companies, consulting fees from firms I'd never heard of, names scribbled in the margins, names that sounded less like business partners and more like men who carried briefcases that clicked open to reveal cash. At the back was a letter, unsigned but clearly written by Robert. If this ever comes to light, protect Margaret. She knows nothing. For a moment, the room spun. My husband, my Robert, had been involved in something Eleanor clearly knew about, something she thought could sink me. I slammed the drawer shut, chest heaving. Later that afternoon, Detective Rodriguez came by to update me on Victoria's case. She noticed my pale face instantly. "Mrs. Whitmore, what's wrong?" I hesitated. Telling the police could mean tarnishing Robert's memory, but hiding it could mean walking straight into Eleanor's trap. Finally, I slid the folder across the table. "Tell me what this means." Rodriguez flipped through the pages, her brow furrowing deeper with each one. "These are offshore accounts. Some of these companies, they've been investigated for money laundering. If Robert was tied to them, even indirectly, it complicates things." "Complicates," I echoed bitterly. "That's law enforcement code for this could blow up in your face." That evening, my phone rang again. Eleanor. Her voice was smooth as ever. "I trust you've been doing some reading, Margaret. Now you see why it's in everyone's interest to resolve this quietly. Imagine the headlines. Widow inherits fortune built on laundering. Doesn't play well, does it?" I gripped the receiver so hard, my knuckles whitened. "You're bluffing," she laughed softly. "Am I? Documents can surface. Memories can be twisted. Reporters love a scandal. Drop the charges against Kevin and Victoria, and Robert's legacy stays clean. Otherwise, well, I can't control what the FBI might dig up." After she hung up, I sat in silence, staring at the phone. Was this what Robert had been trying to protect me from? Had he known his empire wasn't as pristine as it looked? Had he trusted that if the truth came out, I'd crumble? I poured myself a glass of scotch, his scotch, 12 years aged, and stared out the window. The city lights blurred, my reflection staring back. A 68-year-old woman caught between justice for herself and disgrace for her husband's memory. The next day, Daniel called. "Margaret, there's chatter. Eleanor's lawyers are hinting at irregularities. We need to prepare. If this goes public, it could undermine your claim." "My claim?" I snapped. "This isn't about a claim. It's my life, my house, my name." But even as I said it, I felt the tremor of doubt. What if Robert had built everything on sand? What if the house I was fighting for was already poisoned? That night, Victoria called from jail. Her voice was hoarse, desperate. "Mom, please, drop the charges. They're saying terrible things about Dad, about his money. Don't let them drag him down." I closed my eyes. Even behind bars, she was trying to manipulate me. Yet for the first time, she'd touched a nerve. Robert, his name, his honor. "Funny," I said coldly. "Now you care about your father's memory? Where was that care when you kicked me into a motel with $200? Her sobs cracked through the line. "It was Kevin. He said you'd be fine. He said the house was ours by right. I listened. And there it was, the first fracture in her defiance. But fractures don't change facts. Robert's secrets were real. Eleanor's leverage was real. And the choice before me was brutal. Protect my husband's reputation or burn everything down in pursuit of justice." I thought of Robert teaching me chess, his voice steady. "The queen is the most powerful piece, Maggie, but she must know when to sacrifice to win the game." Was this my sacrifice? To let go of vengeance? To shield his memory? No. Because, honey, if Robert was hiding something, it wasn't my burden to carry. His secrets didn't absolve Victoria. His mistakes didn't excuse Kevin. If Eleanor wanted a war, she was about to get one. I called Detective Rodriguez at midnight. Do what you need to do. Dig into Robert's files. If there's dirt, I want to know it. All of it. There was a pause. Are you sure? This could hurt you too. I've been hurt already. Now I want the truth. Every last ugly piece of it. As I hung up, I felt the fear, yes. But beneath it, something else. Defiance. Because Eleanor thought she'd cornered me with a past I didn't know. But she forgot something important. Queens don't just move forward, they move in every direction. And honey, I was done playing defense. You know the moment when you stop being afraid? When the fear burns so long it turns into steel? That was me, sitting alone in Robert's study at 2 a.m., staring at those files Eleanor had used to blackmail me. She thought she had me cornered. She thought I'd fold. But she forgot one thing. Pawns don't stay pawns forever. The next morning, I met Detective Rodriguez at the precinct. She slid a small, velvet pouch across the table. Inside was a sleek recording device, no bigger than a lipstick tube. Wear it close to your chest, she said. Hidden mic, long battery life. We'll be listening from the van outside. I smoothed the edge of my cardigan, tucking it into the seam. For a moment, I felt absurd. A grandmother in pearls playing spy. But then I thought of Victoria calling me dead weight, Kevin sneering, just the wife, Eleanor waving hush money like it was charity. And suddenly, it didn't feel absurd at all. It felt necessary. We set the meeting for Thursday evening, 7 p.m., at Eleanor's penthouse. She thought it was her idea, her invitation. Let's talk privately, Margaret, she'd purred over the phone. No lawyers, just family. Family. That word again, twisted so thin, it snapped. The elevator doors opened into marble floors and glass walls, the kind of place where even the air smelled expensive. Eleanor was waiting with a crystal decanter of scotch, 2 glasses already poured. Margaret, she said smoothly, I'm glad you came. We don't need courts and police meddling in family business. We can settle this woman to woman. I sat, hands folded in my lap, my heart steady, but my mind sharp. Go on, I said. Eleanor leaned in, her voice lowering. Drop the charges. Release Kevin and Victoria. In exchange, we'll make sure Robert's extracurricular finances remain buried. No one needs to know how deep he was in. No one needs to see the evidence. We'll control the narrative. My pulse kicked, but I forced my face calm. And how do I know you have any evidence at all? Her eyes glittered. She rose, crossed to a locked cabinet, and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of Robert's offshore transfers, emails with names I recognized from the files. She slid it toward me. Proof. Enough to smear your husband's legacy beyond repair. Unless, of course, you play smart. I traced a finger across the folder. And if I don't? Her smile was pure venom. Then Robert goes down in history as a crook, and you as the greedy widow who covered it up. Right then, the mic under my cardigan caught every word. In the van outside, Rodriguez and her team were recording. But the real trap wasn't sprung yet. Because Kevin walked in, out on bail for the night, thanks to his mother's money, and a judge with poor judgment. He kissed her cheek, then turned to me with that oily smirk. Margaret, he said, I hear you're finally ready to be reasonable. Reasonable? I echoed. He dropped into the chair opposite me. Let's cut through the drama. We forged the will. Fine. We moved into the house. Fine. But think about it, we were doing you a favor. You're old, alone. You can't manage 30 million. We can. That money was wasted on you. The arrogance, the entitlement, the sheer audacity. I let my voice tremble, just enough. So, it was you, not Victoria? He chuckled. Oh, she signed. But I masterminded the whole thing. Eleanor funded the contacts. Without us, you'd still be sipping instant coffee in that motel. I looked him dead in the eye. And you're proud of that? Proud? He smirked. It was survival. Survival of the fittest. And you, Margaret, you're not fit. That was it. The confession. Rodriguez's voice crackled faintly in my earpiece. We've got enough. Stand by. But I wasn't finished. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Kevin, you want to know the irony? He raised an eyebrow. Your arrogance just signed your prison sentence. Because, honey, I tapped my chest where the mic was hidden. I'm not the one listening. The door burst open. FBI jackets flooded the room. Eleanor's diamonds flashed under the harsh light as agents cuffed her wrists. Kevin froze, mouth half open, before two officers pinned his arms behind his back. Kevin Daniels, Eleanor Hayes, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, blackmail, and obstruction of justice. The irony was almost poetic. Eleanor's perfect penthouse, her shrine of wealth, now filled with the sound of Miranda rights. As they dragged Kevin out, he twisted to look at me, eyes blazing. You think you've won? You think you're better than us? I stood slowly, smoothing my cardigan. Better? No. Smarter? Absolutely. Watch me. After the agents cleared the room, Rodriguez placed a hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Whitmore, you did beautifully. We got it all. Every word. For the first time in weeks, my chest felt light. Not because the war was over, it wasn't, but because the battlefield was finally mine. That night, I poured myself a glass of scotch from Robert's cabinet. This time, it didn't taste like betrayal. It tasted like victory. Because Eleanor thought she held the strings. Kevin thought he was the puppet master. But in the end, they danced to my tune. The pawn had become the queen, and the queen had just declared checkmate. There's a silence that only comes after a storm, the kind where the air still hums with electricity, but the thunder has finally rolled past. That's the silence I woke up to in my own bed, sunlight streaming through curtains that once again belonged to me. No motel neon, no gas station coffee, no shame, just my house, my rules, my life. The trial came fast, faster than Eleanor or Kevin ever expected. With the FBI recordings, the forged documents, and their own arrogant confessions, the prosecution didn't need theatrics. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When the foreman read the verdict guilty on all counts, Victoria collapsed into tears. Kevin stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as if disbelief could undo handcuffs. Eleanor? She tried to glare at me across the courtroom, but her diamonds didn't shine quite as bright under fluorescent lights. I didn't gloat, not out loud, but inside, honey, I was standing taller than I had in years. And then came the twist no one saw coming. Detective Rodriguez requested a private meeting after court. She slid another folder across the table. I braced myself, half expecting more skeletons from Robert's locked drawer. But what I saw made my hands shake for a different reason. Mrs. Whitmore, she said, your husband wasn't laundering money. He was helping us catch the people who were. I blinked, stunned. What? She nodded. Robert was an FBI informant for nearly 15 years. Every suspicious transfer, every offshore account you saw the files, those were reports he kept for us. He wasn't dirty, he was cleaning house. The world tilted. All those late nights at his desk. The secrecy, the letter in the drawer. Protect Margaret. She knows nothing. He hadn't been hiding shame, he'd been shielding me from danger. The irony was so perfect, it was almost poetic. Eleanor's blackmail, the one card she thought would topple me, was built on Robert's loyalty to justice. For the first time since he died, I felt him with me again, not as a shadow, but as a shield. The government restored every penny, every asset. $30 million, clean, the house, the accounts, even Robert's reputation, now stronger than ever. But money wasn't the victory. The victory was walking through those doors, my doors, and knowing no one could ever take them from me again. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles again, not out of pity this time, but respect. The women at church whispered, Margaret's stronger than all of them combined. Even the mailman grinned when he handed me my letters. But the sweetest moment came 3 weeks later, when I stood in front of the mirror in Robert's study, pearl necklace fastened, papers signed, and said aloud, this is my house, my name, my legacy. And honey, it felt damn good. With Daniel's help, I established the Whitmore Foundation. Not for Victoria, not for Kevin, not for Eleanor's spoiled circle. For women like me, mothers, widows, grandmothers who'd been told they were burdens, dead weight, just the wife. We funded shelters, legal aid, financial literacy programs. Because revenge is sweet, but building something lasting, that's divine. One evening, sipping tea on my porch, Victoria came by. Released on probation after testifying against Kevin, she looked smaller somehow, stripped of her arrogance. Mom, she whispered, eyes downcast. I'm sorry. I studied her carefully. My daughter, my blood, the girl I'd raised, the woman who'd betrayed me. Family? I asked quietly. Or just DNA? Her tears answered for her. I didn't slam the door, but I didn't invite her in either. Forgiveness, like inheritance, has conditions. That night, I poured a glass of scotch, Robert's scotch, and raised it to the quiet room. The best revenge, I murmured, isn't getting even. It's becoming everything they swore you'd never be. Then I set the glass down, straightened my back, and smiled. Because the pawn had become the queen. And the queen had built an empire. Family? No, that's DNA. Tell me, honey, would you press charges against your own child? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want more stories like mine, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it.